Hello, and welcome to our webinar on using ESSER funds to invest in professional learning and collaboration through strategic staffing and scheduling. I'm Ryan Kelly. I'm a principal associate at Education Resource Strategies. ERS is a national nonprofit that partners with district, school, and state leaders to transform how they use resources, people, time, and money, so that every school prepares every child for tomorrow, no matter their race or income. Specifically, in furthering our mission in this moment of response of the disruptions to student experiences caused by COVID-19, ERS has created a series of guidebooks to support districts in strategically implementing high-impact strategies using stimulus dollars with an eye toward sustainability. We're excited to highlight today some shining examples of transformational work happening across the country, where districts and schools are making intentional efforts to support teachers and students and improve schools now, while also engaging in critical conversations and shifts to ensure the sustainability of those strategies once short-term revenue streams expire. Our professional learning and collaboration resource guide focuses on how districts might organize resources, including short-term ESSER funding, as well as strategic staffing and scheduling decisions to find the time and create the conditions where effective professional learning and teacher development can occur. So every school and district's at a different place with their professional learning strategy, regardless of where you are. Grounding ourselves in what the research says is always a good place to start. So wanted to name a few things that we see come up consistently in the research that is good to keep in mind. So there's 4 key elements that come up consistently. First is you need high quality curriculum and assessments. The research is really clear here. Having a starting point that's aligned to standards and grade level rigor allows for collaboration and coaching to go much deeper. In other words, strong curriculum is both good for kids, but also has a positive impact on how teachers develop and collaborate. The second thing in the research is the importance of shared content teams led by experts with opportunities to meet for at least 90 minutes per week to internalize lessons, to build pedagogical and content knowledge, and to analyze student work. Third is frequent growth-oriented feedback. This is often done effectively by ensuring every teacher is paired with an instructional coach, whether that's a teacher, somebody in a dedicated coaching role, or an administrator that can provide differentiated support to that teacher. And the fourth thing we see is this importance of focusing on individualized student support. This means that teacher teams should have opportunities to coordinate student supports and interventions, and teachers should have time individually to analyze student work and plan responses to data. So with this research in mind, where should we invest? There's several key components of a strong investment in professional learning. Today, we're going to go deeper into these top 2 components that are in the purple box: content expert roles and dedicated time for professional learning and collaboration. As important, but not the focus of today's talk, are high-quality aligned instructional materials, curriculum and assessments, and also program management that creates the systems and capacity to develop, manage, and monitor professional learning systems across the system. As you consider your own set of professional learning investments, note that a common mistake that we see in districts and schools around the country is what we call a piecemeal investment in professional learning. We see, for example, a large investment in professional learning time without an investment in teacher leaders or coaches who are trained and supported to facilitate the time. Or vice versa, districts who go big on coaching without pairing that investment with structured time for coaches to plan for and facilitate collaborative teacher learning time. So think about completeness and coherence of investments, and that thinking about the completeness and coherence is almost as important here as the investments themselves. So in a moment, we'll shift our focus to how to build the structures and schedules and staffing for professional learning. But I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to highlight the importance of having a clear vision for how you will use the time that we'll be talking about creating. There are a lot of different types of meetings and coaching structures that we can choose to do. We in districts and schools often have so many priorities and are trying to meet so many different needs. This slide shows some of the most impactful types of meetings and coaching structures you can incorporate into your broader vision. If you're not sure where to start, or if you're looking to take on one thing first, based on research, we advise starting with finding 90 minutes per week for teachers who share content to collaborate around unit and lesson planning and analyzing student data. The very best schedules also find time for teachers who share students to collaborate when these are 2 different groups, as they often are at the secondary level. I also want to pause for a moment at the box at the bottom right of this slide, expert roles. Just like you need to have a plan for what you want to achieve during professional learning time, you also need the content experts who are able to effectively lead the time with the group of teachers. Creating the time for teachers to meet without being thoughtful about who will be facilitating the time is not setting you up for success. I'll discuss in a little bit some ways that schools can invest in this expertise. So let's shift and talk about this at the resource level. What should we be thinking about as we set up or improve our systems for professional learning? So at the resource level, there are 3 key decisions that we should keep in mind, and we're going to go through each of these in more detail. So the decision points are, number 1, determine who should meet, for how long, and how frequently, and also how much individual planning time that you want teachers to have. Second is finding the time. So how are you going to create the opportunities for those meetings that you just planned to occur? And finally, finding the expertise, ensuring that you have that expertise in order to lead the learning and the collaboration. So let's go through these one by one now. So first is who should meet and for how long. This slide lays out the most common strategies for collaborative teams. You can spend some more time reading the details in our guidebook, but the key point here is that you should spend some time developing your overall vision. Again, who will meet, for how long, how frequently. The answers to those questions will dictate your strategies for ensuring teachers have the time to carry out those meetings and for ensuring you have the expertise to do them well. The second decision is how will you find the time for those teams to meet? This is often the hardest part. Here are some of our elementary examples for how to do this. And we'll talk in more detail in a second about this, but I want to note that there's an intersection between the way you choose to create time and who can be there. For example, some schools and districts use an early release model where students have essentially a student half day once a week. And what that does is creates a lot of flexible time when people can meet in many combinations. But you might also hit a constraint if you only have 1 or 2 admins who are providing the expert support across teams. It can be harder to then provide that support simultaneously with different teams. So starting for the vision for who needs to be there is essential as we then create the containers for those meetings to actually take place. There are many options that we've seen districts take to create this time for collaboration. You'll have to decide which will work best for your context and community. You can find more details about all of these in our guidebook. I'm going to talk about these 3 in white right now in a little bit more depth. So the first one that we see often leveraged effectively is this idea of adding a specials block weekly at the elementary level. This is done especially well when you pair this next to an existing specials block so that there's double the time in order for teachers to collaborate and meet when students are in either an extended specials block or going to 2 specials blocks back to back. How this typically plays out is students have the same schedule 4 times a week, and then once a week they have an extended specials time. On the right side of this slide, you can see what the specials teacher's schedule might look like, where in the left column it shows the normal length specials block 4 days a week, and in the right column we have extra staff members, librarian, counselor, for example, supporting double specials blocks. You can also do this by rotating the day when each grade has double specials. But the concept is supporting extra specials time to create an extended collaboration block for teachers, however you choose to staff it. Another option we've seen work well in elementary school is hiring a floating core content teacher. This often plays out as a floating science teacher. In some schools, this is considered science as a special. The idea is that you have an extra teacher who teaches 1 content subject across classes. This frees up the homeroom teacher for 1 extra block a day, building an extra time for planning and collaboration. And it has the added benefit of reducing the prep that homeroom teachers need to do, since they no longer have to prep for the content that the floating teacher is providing. There are some trade-offs here to be aware of. You need to have a teacher that can manage a classroom and not have as strong relationships with their students because they have a wider caseload of students. And it's not always easy to find that STEM expertise in order to do this with science. It also often requires an extra FTE. Third option I want to highlight is stacking planning time with non-instructional blocks that are covered by other staff. This isn't elementary specific, but the move here is to have a teacher's planning block next to non-instructional blocks, like arrival, dismissal, lunch and recess, and provide coverage so that the teacher doesn't need to be with students during those non-instructional times. So we've seen schools have a rotation where special teachers rotate and cover dismissal homeroom and dismissal duties for a different grade each day. And those grade level teachers also have a prep right at the end of the day that abuts that covered non-instructional time. And that adds up to an opportunity for longer collaboration time. So in the example on this slide, 1 day per week, second grade teachers have extended collaboration time because other staff are covering their closing and dismissal duties. And the regular block is scheduled for planning to be last period. One of the trade-offs to be aware of here in terms of resource implications is your staffing. So you need to be thoughtful around how many homerooms do you have in a grade level? Who are the people that can this be specialist teachers? Is it admin? Do you have instructional assistants? Who are the people that are able to cover those duties in order to create the time for students? And so those were some elementary examples, and I want to shift now and looking at some approaches that we've seen high schools and secondary schools take. This slide summarizes all of the approaches that we detail in our guidebook, but right now I want to dig down specifically into 2 in particular. So one option is leveraging external partnerships. Some examples of this are outside organizations that provide tutoring and mentorship or run activities and clubs. This creates blocks of free times for many teachers at once that you can coordinate to form the teams that you want to meet. So an example schedule seen here on the slide, once per week, all the 11th graders have an activity block that's supported by an external partnership for the first couple hours of the day. And that allows all of those teachers freedom to meet with content teams and discuss students and interventions they want to make. A couple trade-offs to point out here. One is that depending on how this is done, if there isn't a change in the sort of electives that students are taking, it might cause a reduction in course seat time. There might also be additional financial costs with the external partnership, all things to consider if this is a path that you choose you want to learn more about or pursue. Another move we've seen is moving to a block schedule, which tends to increase individual planning time for teachers. And what we've seen is that schools that move from a traditional to a block schedule end up with more instructional time because it eliminates many transitions. If you want more information about the trade-offs of a block schedule, you can reference our guidebook. But I know this is a thing that high schools think a lot about in terms of a traditional versus a block schedule, and so wanted to give the professional learning lens for any schools that are thinking about that decision. So those are some examples of ways that we can create the time in the day in order for this professional learning and collaboration to happen. And you can find more information and more details in our guidebook, but wanted to move now to a point that I emphasized earlier about the importance of having content experts who are able to effectively lead the collaboration time that we're trying to create, as well as lead the coaching cycles with individual teachers. So decision 3 is, how do you ensure that you have that expertise? This slide highlights the 3 most effective approaches we've seen to this. One option is to create teacher leader roles. More on this in a moment. A second option is to hire full-time instructional coaches, either at the school level or shared across schools. And a third option is to create capacity in current administrative roles by redistributing administrative duties, allowing the principal or AP to have more time to do this specific type of work. These options have different costs and benefits, as you'll notice on the slide. Also want to point out, these are not mutually exclusive. We often see schools utilize a combination of these 3 options as they create their teams of experts for their schools. Regardless of which type of expert roles work best for your context, perhaps the most important thing is that our experts are expert. They're carefully vetted by a common and high quality set of criteria that center around content expertise, and they have the time and support to continue to develop their own expertise in the context of their role. Investing in instructional expertise without these enabling conditions is likely to have a limited impact. Let's double click on that first teacher leader role point. One effective way that we've seen systems and schools invest in instructional expertise is through teacher leader roles. Systems that focus here are often seeking a number of benefits. One is it's a way to expand the impact of their strongest teachers across more students while also allowing them to stay in the classroom. Second is it's a way to ensure experts have deep content expertise. So it's harder for an assistant principal to oversee a breadth of content areas, all with deep expertise, whereas this allows more content specificity. And third, this is often done as part of an effort to create a more visible teacher career path where teachers have options to increase their responsibility and their pay without leaving the classroom. In terms of how to organize these roles, we've learned that it's important to account for how teacher leaders will spend their day as decisions are made about how many teacher leaders are needed and how much release time each individual should have. Teacher leaders not only need the time to join the meetings with the teachers they're supporting, but also to prepare for those meetings and to develop their own skill and expertise. How do you create capacity in your schedule and staffing model for teacher leaders to do all of these things? Well, in elementary school, we've seen models where 2 teacher leaders share a homeroom, so they each spend 50% of their time with students and 50% on instructional leadership responsibilities. We've also seen teacher residency models and use of floating teachers to create opportunities for release time to teacher leaders, as some examples. In high school, what we often see is a reduced load for teacher leaders. So teacher leaders may teach 5 out of 7 periods instead of 6 out of 7, for example, in order to build that capacity for instructional leadership responsibilities. Hopefully those examples are illustrative to give some ideas about how to create the capacity for content experts. Can't make the point strongly enough that strong professional learning depends on having these experts and giving them the capacity to effectively play that role. So before we close, we want to name some of the common challenges we hear most often from our district partners, along with some considerations for each one. First is figuring out how to get the most from the professional learning time you create. Here we'll emphasize again, thinking about the content experts and making sure they have the support and capacity to fulfill their responsibilities is paramount. This is potentially a place to use ESSER funds to invest. Using one-time funds to access new capacity and expertise through third-party organizations can help you build your systems in your district as you move towards sustainability. A second common challenge we've seen is schools creating the time for collaboration, but the experts leading it are getting burnt out because they feel like they don't have the time to prepare for meetings. We need to invest in the time and resources for our experts to do this well. Good rule of thumb here is ensuring the experts facilitating meetings have at least the length of time of the meeting in order to prepare for it. So if they're leading 4 60-minute content meetings each week, they should have 4 times 60 minutes in order to prepare for those meetings. It can be a big investment and a lot of time. But again, if we're making this investment in professional learning, we want to make sure that it is done well and with high quality. If prep time isn't possible, another option here is to add stipends to account for the additional time that you're asking for your experts to take. And finally, a third challenge that we want to name is finding time in the day and figuring out what to prioritize. I think the point we want to make here is the big thing to avoid is small chunks of time with interruptions. We found it is really essential to have uninterrupted time in order to allow for deep thinking and allow for teachers and experts to really get into it and do the hard work that is preparing and developing in their job. So we've heard a lot about the various strategies for thinking about content expertise and building schedules that create opportunities for collaboration. Let's bring it back to the current context. How do we use the ESSER opportunity to invest in some of these approaches? The availability of stimulus funds might mean the next couple of school years are an ideal time to invest in things like new curriculum and training for instructional coaches. ESSER dollars can certainly be used for short-term professional learning opportunities. However, this can't happen indefinitely. This is also the perfect time to pilot more sustainable approaches. Our guide provides concrete examples of sustainable PLC structures to pilot that tackle 2 main challenges that schools face: how to find the time in the school day and how to find people who have expertise to lead the time. As is the case with any priority investment, systems should put into place for continuous improvement cycles to identify what's working, where systems can be improved. For professional learning, this likely means looking at some leading indicators, like our coaching and collaboration systems being implemented with fidelity, and also lagging indicators, such as the impact on student outcomes. You can find even more content on finding time for professional learning in our full guidebook, including more details on how to sustainably use short-term funds to build strong systems and more detailed examples of ways to reduce teacher load. We greatly appreciate all the work that you're doing for students and families and hope that you found today's webinar to be thought-provoking and helpful as you build stronger professional learning and collaboration in your schools and district. We'd love to keep in touch. If there are ways that we at ERS can support you or learn from you, please reach out using any of the methods that you see on this screen. And as a reminder, this guide of professional learning is just one in a series of high-impact ESSER investment strategies that we've created guidance on. We'll be diving into other topics like targeted academic supports, building student-teacher relationships in elementary schools in future webinars. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.